So, copyright the High Exalted.
Also a beast of an MC at the time. I had heard him through a group called Megahertz that had records out on Bobito's Fondulum label, but he really stood out to me as an MC. So I sought him out personally, signed him to a one-off at first that did really well. There was a posse cut on the B-side that I produced with Eon and Cage called Tower of Babel. So it got a really good response, and we just decided to make it an LP. Unfortunately, he's had some personal problems in the recent years. I produced a couple new songs for him, but I think he's could be incarcerated at the moment, unfortunately.
Okay. The Highlight Zone, 2003.
Highlight Zone. That was our third release. That's the one with the bobbleheads on the front, yeah?
Right.
Another kind of sports-related release with the Sports Center on the front. Just us still going on with our themes, and I feel like the production had become more full at that time. Had some good guest MCs on there. Tame is on that album a lot, just ripping shit. But it kind of is, whereas Home Field Advantage was more outside artists, Highlight Zone is more highlighting the Eastern Conference artists. We feel like we had a real strong inner circle at that time. So we said, fuck it, let's just, highlight the MCs that are on our label on this one.
Right. You returned on Cage's Weatherproof in 2003. What do you remember most about that project?
That's another EP. Cage. Some really good RJD2 songs on there. I think Cage had moved to the city by that point. He used to live upstate New York. So now I think he's living in New York, which makes him more like accessible to record and just be around other rappers. I think that shows on that. He's still angry as fuck, and entertaining, dissing rappers that he shouldn't even like blink twice at. But those were the times, man. Beef was driving everything.
Right. How did Tame One come to the label? And what do you remember most about When Rappers Attack?
Tame One and Mad Skills were both brought to me by my boy Reef, who was an A&R at Big Beat at the time and had signed Artifacts and Mad Skills. So when those projects, for whatever reason, stopped happening on Big Beat, he would say to them, hey, my boy Mighty Mai has this label, Eastern Conference. They have distribution. So it was just him kind of funneling the artists he had signed to major labels to now my indie label. And I love him forever for that. And I was kind of involved at the time with a lot of white labels also. Like Skills brought me that Aaliyah Are You That Somebody remix with him and the Super Friends rhyming over that great Timberland beat that we pressed up on bootleg, and I brought it to Funk Master Flex and he was playing it every night. So I was kind of at the time really ingrained in the indie rap world, but also kind of like the working DJ New York world of making bootlegs and remixes and the whole Hot 97 Funk Master Flex world. Which was kind of cool to be part of both worlds,
Right. So, was Cage and Tame One's relationship based on maybe you bringing them together, or did they previously know each other before the label?
I think Tame had definitely heard Agent Orange and was a fan of Cage, and we were all a fan of Tame's. I mean, obviously, the concept between their album is Angel Dust and the love of smoking dust. So that brought them together, just a PCP habit. I never saw them do it in front of me. I think it was more the lore of it by that time.
Right.
But definitely that album is about PCP, believe it or not.
Didn't know. Now I know. Fun fact.
Yeah, that's what Leak is. So the Leak brothers is
right.
The Angel Dust brothers.
Right. guys returned with 12th Man in 2005. What did you, the creative process after all this time, all your production, what did you go into this, the frame of mind going into this album?
That's actually my favorite High and Mighty album. I think it's Eon's best lyrical album. He had just kind of perfected his own craft by that time. I produced the whole album, and that album is kind of about just being about me and Eon, back to a two-man crew. We had started as a two-man crew, and all of these other artists and rappers were part of our creative process. And the first High and Mighty album is almost like a compilation album. So 12th Man is just all about just it being back to just the two of us, two people that were best friends since we were 10 years old, just happened to make records together. So 12th Man is like the return of, just like Eon says, me and Milo.
Right. Reef the Lost Cause, Feast or Famine?
He's another Philly artist, and I went to high school with the guy who was putting his records out at the time. So that was someone who said, hey, could we use EC as kind of like a middleman to put out Reef? And then I ended up loving him also as an artist. So it really just worked out as initially just a favor to a high school friend, but then, full-blown supporting of the artist and the label and,
Right. At this point, where's the label at? Is it something that you wanted to continue to pursue and look for new artists? Or at this time, are you trying to transition into something different?
Well, by this time, Eon had moved back to Philly. So now I'm in New York by myself. Also, the indie rap world had kind of bottomed out at that point, just through illegal downloading. So whereas someone like Eminem could afford 1 million people downloading his album because he's still going to sell 4 million legally, it totally cut into our profit margin. So we couldn't afford people downloading our albums anymore. So the profit margin really disappeared. And I kind of started DJing again in nightclubs, and then got the gig in Las Vegas and moved out here. So it was probably time for us all to kind of move on at that point. Indie hip hop had kind of like lost its lore. But now working on the new album now, it's a lot of fun just because we had taken so many years off. It's kind of fresh again,
Right. So what's that creative process like after all these years? Was 12th Man your last?
Yeah. I think that's 2005 or 2006. Yep. So now 15 years later, we have a whole new album done. And we have songs with OC and Chubb Rock and Artifacts and Breezely Bruin and 7L and Esoteric and Kool Keith. So it's a return to guest rappers. I'm doing all the production. I had to convince Eon that his writing still sounded good. He was unsure that after all these years, he could still write. So once we reassured him, I went down to Philly to do some studio sessions with him, and his son is now in the studio with us, listening to his father rhyme. So it's a whole different, element this time around. But it's fun. It's like dad rap.
Right. Do you prefer these methods of recording now? I mean, all you have to really do is send the music and you don't really have to be in the studio. Or did you prefer that whole, trying to gather up everybody for a studio session?
Yeah, there's still no feeling like being there with the other human being in the same room, You can read their facial expressions. You can see if they're excited by your take or not. But it seems to have been working out. Like, I'll send him the beats. He'll go to the studio, and then he'll email me right from the studio. I'll listen to it live, say, hey, I think you could do line 7 a little bit better. So it's almost like being there live with him.
Right. Any plans for the 25th anniversary of your debut album this year?
We'll re-release it on vinyl. We've been putting out a lot of our old Eastern Conference stuff, reissues when they have anniversaries, through a great Italian label called Tough Kong.
Oh, yeah.
Obviously a play on Bob Marley's Tough Kong. But they just do a great job. They know exactly how many to press to make a profit. They all sell out in the first week. we usually put a little something extra on there. So on the Home Field Advantage reissue, there'll be some original demo versions or a remix, and it's just fun to do on vinyl. And then I hope we do a little bit of touring.
Right. You spoke of transitioning out to Las Vegas. What gig was that brought you out there?
I got a gig at a club they opened at the Wynn Casino out here. And after years of carrying crates up staircases in New York, this was going to kind of be my payoff. So it was years of paying my dues, making a couple $100 a night. Now I'm in these lavish Las Vegas nightclubs and making 4 figures a night. So it was just kind of, a little bit of selling my soul, but saying, hey, it's finally time to make some real dough.
What kind of music do they have you spin